Welcome to Faith Talks Wood Podcast. I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.
And we're a podcast about everything from Jesus to joinery and a little bit of everything in between. Tom, it is officially fall here in northwestern Pennsylvania. The trees are orange and red, and it is 46 degrees out as we're recording this right now. And I absolutely love it. Nothing better than jeans and hoodie weather to me. When we lived in Nashville, I hated because it don't get cold in Nashville until like end of November, December. It starts getting chilly out, and so love this weather. Ready for some snow.
Me too.
As much as all my southern friends hate that word, but just want to say real quick before we get too deep in the podcast, we want to be praying for those affected by the Hurricane Helene. I've been to Asheville, and it's weird, and I know people that live there, that it's like in a mountain, and you wouldn't think that a place like that would be flood territory, and a lot of devastation throughout the Carolinas and East Tennessee, and just want to lift up those who've been affected in prayer. Know that we're praying for you, and that God is bigger than this. And we hope and pray that you can find peace in the situation. So hate seeing it. I did mission work 2 years in a row after Katrina. And so I've dealt firsthand with flood and all that kind of stuff. And it's not fun. So just want to throw that out there to be praying for those in the Carolinas, East Tennessee that way. And there's another one coming. What are they calling it? Is it Philip or something? No, I just saw it on the news there's another big hurricane coming towards Florida right now. Right now it's a category 4.
Yeah. So they were saying it might be a 5 when it hits the coast of and I know this, if you're in Florida, you're not wanting to hear this, but our good buddy Everett, he's right down there, where it's
the Panhandle.
Yeah. Yep. But I hate to say it, it is better that it goes the direction it is right now versus coming back the same path that the last one did, because, man, up through the Panhandle, through Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, they can't handle no more rain, man.
No.
It is crazy. My mom is still without power, and my aunt and uncle still without power. They didn't get flooded out, but, man, dude, I born and raised in South Carolina, lived in North Carolina 30 years, and I've been to Asheville and Brevard and all those places up in there many, many times, and such beautiful country. And, dude, just like there are towns, Lake Lure. I've swam in that lake. Beautiful, beautiful place. And, dude, it's gone. Like the whole town is just washed away, and so sad to see. So sad.
It is. I know our church is looking to partner with some, I think IDES probably, to do some mission work down there. And it's insane. Hate seeing it. But yeah, and it's a place like you never, like I said, think you're going to be affected by a hurricane in Asheville or, Virginia. Like, it's just not something that is common. So yeah. I'll say we moved away from Tennessee. One of the things we were happy to move away from is tornadoes. They were all over the place down there. And then we move up here, and guess what we had Sunday? There was a tornado that dropped down on the eastern side of our county. It's like, hold on a second. I thought we moved away from this. And so I hate weather, but I love snow. They could drop 2 foot of snow, and I'd be like, oh, let's do it. But it's funny how that works, though, because those from the South, when we moved to Tennessee, you said the S word, people start crying. It's just like they would shut down the whole city
for a half an inch of snow.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Now I will say, and our guest that we have probably can relate to this, the ice is the issue, right? Down there, down in the South, the rain comes, it's so cold, it freezes, and then it's snow on top of it. And it is a bit crazier than just up here. I learned how to drive through 15 inches of snow. That's when I got my permit to drive a vehicle. We went to church the next morning. My dad threw me the keys, and I'm like, what do you think? He's like, you got to learn somehow. And so I am more comfortable driving in a snowstorm than I am a rainstorm. I hate driving when it's, super, super heavy rain and stuff, but it could be a whiteout. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine. So crazy how that's different. But yeah. So before we get into the guests, I just want to say thank you to all the patron supporters. You guys are killing it over there. We really, really appreciate you. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can do so at patreon.com/Faith Talks Wood. Also ask for a 5-star review on Apple. We want the podcast to be found. And if we have a 5-star review on Apple, people find it easier. Just that whole analytics or the SEO thing, search engine optimization. So, and then pray for the podcast. As you guys know, this is a ministry. This is something Tom and I are passionate about, and we want to continue to do God's will as we do this podcast. So without further ado, today's guest, I'm a little bit fanboying about. I started woodworking. Well, I mean, I started in high school, but then really got serious about it when we bought our first house and couldn't afford to buy anything. That was about 6 years ago, six and a half years ago. But I've been watching Andy on YouTube. He used to do like carvings, and he'd like carve a spoon or a plane way back in the day. And that's when I first found his channel. And then ever since then, I watched just about every video and seen him through the stages of life and doing all the different stuff. And I remember watching a video. I don't remember which one it was, but Andy talked about his faith in Jesus. I don't know if it was something that happened. I don't remember. It was years ago. And ever since then, I'm like, oh, this guy, notification on YouTube. Like, I want to know when this is happening, when he's dropping videos. And so as we started the podcast, you get to know like, oh man, there's other Christian woodworkers, other Christian makers. And one of the first ones that popped into my head was Andy. Now, truth be told, I sent him an Instagram message a while ago. I don't think he checks Instagram that often, or probably got blocked or something. And so I went on his website and acted like I was going to buy a piece of furniture from him and just said, hey, this is who I am, just because I wanted to get a hold of him. And so without further ado, Andy Rawls is on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thanks, Will. Really appreciate it. I do apologize for that slow response.
No, it's okay.
I'm very excited to be here. So
yeah, thanks. It's strange with a podcast. A main way we contact people is through Instagram. Yeah, and Instagram will block requests or put you like in a quarantine area if you're not friends with them or whatever it may be. And so it happens a lot. We find out somebody's a Christian and we're like, we want to have them on a podcast. And
I'm glad you finally got a hold of me. So happy to be.
Yeah, very good. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, what you do, and then we'll get into your testimony here in a bit.
Yeah, so I have a furniture business in Fine, Texas, which is outside of San Antonio. And alongside that furniture business, I run a YouTube channel, which is just basically my name, Andy Rawls. And like you said, I've been doing that for probably 7 or 8 years now. Most of what I do now is custom furniture. I've got roughly 5 to 6 month backlog, and I work mostly solo on everything. I do have a part-time guy who jumps in and helps a couple days a week. And I've been running my furniture business, which I started before the YouTube channel, since 2012. So that's kind of where I'm at in the moment right now. Got 3 kids, and my shop's on my property. So I feel very blessed. I often sit down and think about where my mind was in my 20s when I felt like I wanted to be a furniture maker. And I mean, I would dream about what I have now. So I'm very thankful that I've got my kids out here and my shop here, and I'm able to do what I love. So
absolutely, that's awesome. You had, was it Robert? You had as an apprentice for a while?
Yeah. So Robert was with me. He moved from Florida, and he was with me for 2 years. And he's now about 5 minutes up the road from me doing his own thing in his own shop. So
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
I always wondered what happened, Robert.
I didn't talk about it much, and I had a lot of people ask in the comments, and I thought about posting a video, but I don't know. There was, if I'm being honest, it was a bit of a rocky departure. It was unexpected when he decided to leave, but there's no hard feelings. I actually saw Robert 2 nights ago or last week at a friend's birthday party, and we spent 30 minutes talking, catching up. And, it's just like anything, when you're in business, relationships could be tricky. And Robert's a great guy. Actually would be a good candidate for this podcast. He's got an incredible testimony. He's been through a lot, and he's come out on a really good side of things. And he's doing well here. Bernie's a great place to be. So there's plenty of room for both of us to be building furniture. So I'm happy for him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. One of the first videos I remember you doing was a spoon with Osage orange.
Oh yeah. Dude, and those first carving videos did so well. I don't know. YouTube loved those videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's how I found you. And because of that video, I got an obsession with Osage orange.
Yeah, it's cool.
Just because the wood is really neat. I've built a couple things out of it, and it's harder than rock, man.
It's so hard. It's stupid to carve anything out of it, man.
I made a boot jack. You put one foot on it, and then you can take your cowboy boots off, and cutting the shape out of just a solid piece of wood. Yeah. I thought I was cutting a piece of cold roll steel.
It's hard,
yeah. So
there's houses in Texas in the Hill, like courthouses, that if you crawl underneath them, they're sitting on Osage. They're just sitting on blocks of Osage, and they've been that way for over 100 years. The stuff is just, it doesn't rot. The bugs stay out of it. It's rock solid stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We don't have much of it up here in Pennsylvania. It was all over down through Tennessee.
Really?
You'd see it like farms, and you'd see a row of it, because they used it as, they called it hedge apple, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they would use it as like hedgerows, because all the big thorns on the trees and stuff. I've tried growing them on my property. I have one that's grown a little bit. I planted them as seedlings, and the other one didn't do anything. I chopped it down. Trying to get a variety of trees on the property. So
that's cool.
Yeah, awesome. So, as you know, the podcast Faith Talks Wood. And so, Andy, tell us a little bit about your testimony. Tell us, upbringing, grew up in church. What's your story about how you come to where you're at with Jesus?
Yeah. So, it's so easy to get into a very long, detailed testimony, but I'll try not to go too long. But I grew up in a really solid Christian household. I have an older brother, and then my parents, were just, very involved in church. My dad has been a great example of how to be a Christian father, husband. So I had all the advantages I needed. I went to church as a kid. I remember we lived in Fort Worth, and when we went to Travis Avenue Baptist Church, there was a Joel Gregory, who was a pretty well-known Baptist preacher who preached there. And that's where I got baptized when I was 8. Pretty young. I think, part of my testimony is I feel very, that process, I felt led by the Holy Spirit. I think there was I was obviously genuine in that decision, but very naive and non-understanding of what was going on. I remember people telling me, you're going to get dunked under the water, your life's going to change. And I remember, getting baptized and not feeling anything, and as a child, you don't know what to expect. And so I didn't have a full grasp of the gospel message. And I honestly at the time probably didn't even understand that believers' baptism is just an expression of your faith, and to let people know, hey, look, I believe in this, and I want everyone to know. So regardless, I was saved at that point. That's what I believe. And as I got older, I struggled a lot as a young kid. I was involved in youth ministry, Young Life. I just struggled a lot with this conviction that I wasn't sure if I was truly saved. I mentally had this challenge with it all the time. I remember as a kid just praying and asking God to kind of, give me comfort in that. And I don't know, there was just I always had that battle. And at some point, as I became older as a teenager, there was something that drew me to the world, I mean, I started just doing things I shouldn't have been doing, and running around with people I shouldn't have been running around. I went to school at Baylor University, which is a Christian university, and I never stepped foot in a church there. I mean, I left home, and pretty much from that point was just kind of lost. I really was. I was not around fellow Christians. I got involved in the fraternity life, the party scene. So I had this mentality in my early 20s that, the life is just meant to be enjoyed and to have fun. And I remember, I think the biggest, as I'm older now, I'm 43 now, like I look back when I share my testimony, I always think about my mentality was always like, I can have fun now and then have Jesus later, and that was like the biggest lie the devil ever told me. And I wish I could go back. I mean, if I could ever go back in time, I would want to go back and correct that, and just like, that's just a huge lie, and the decisions I made in my 20s and the things I did impact the sin that I was involved in, impacts myself now, so that's lifelong. And, as I kind of rolled through college and didn't really have a purpose, didn't know what I wanted to do. I was studying film and video production. I always had at that point the desire to build things. My dad had a little shop at the garage, and they lived about 30 minutes from the university. So I would drive home and build furniture for my apartment and all that stuff. And so I kind of was conflicted as college ended and what I wanted to do with my life. And I was just at a very confused point. And mixed into that, my dad had taken me. The cool thing about my dad is anytime I had a hobby or interest, it would become his. Like, I got into fly fishing in high school, and sure enough, he's like buying fly rods and we're taking classes together, and he's taking me fishing. And that's something we've done together, since I was 18 years old. And then when I got into woodworking, next thing you know, tools start showing up in the garage, and he's woodworking and we're doing it together. And then he got into the hand tool stuff, which I thought was not cool at all. I was like, why are we using these hand tools when we have machines? But there was a school in Waco called Homestead Heritage. Not a school, but it's kind of a community. And they had a woodworking school there that Paul Sellers ran. And at the time, Frank Straza was teaching at. So I was like 10 minutes from two big name hand tool woodworkers. And so I had the opportunity. My dad and I took several classes from Paul Sellers, and I was probably a junior in college at the time. And that was when I took those classes, that's when I was like, I love this. Like this. And Paul Sellers, he was at that time, spoke very much about his faith and how it intermixed into woodworking. He was just kind of like a very wise man, and he was an interesting guy. And I connected with the way he presented hand tool working and watching him do it and then having the opportunity to do it. So that really sent me in my mind, saying, I want to be a furniture maker. But I was still at this point where I was, college is just ending kind of around here. I had a girlfriend for 3 years that was like not interested in dating a man who was going to be a furniture maker. So, she moved home and basically dumped me, and all my friends went to law school, medical school, got jobs in the corporate world, got married. And I'm like still super confused about life and running around doing things I shouldn't be doing. So I just remember, like, when I think about that time, just being very lost. And there was a man who I had gotten to know through a Spanish language program in Costa Rica through Baylor. And he kind of ran that program. And this is kind of a pivotal point where God really shook me. He took me to Mexico. He kind of hired me to help him run a new Spanish language school in Mexico. So I came along with them, along with two other fresh college grads, one of which I knew. And we traveled through Mexico, and, I'm 25. I'm like, this is super cool. We're having fun, and we're going to start these schools. Like, this sounds great. And the middle of the night, one night, he basically ends up molesting me in the middle of a hotel room. So I'm like just like, I'm out of here. Like I panic. It's a very like hard thing to talk about, because when it happened, like I felt like my heart was going to beat out of my chest. And I walked straight down. He went to the bathroom. I walked straight down to the front desk of this Mexican hotel in the middle of nowhere. And the guy's like looking at me like, what's wrong with this dude? I'm like, hey, I need a cab now. I need to get to the airport. And I borrow $200 from the other guy that was there. And I take $200 of my dollars and I get in a cab, which, mind you, is not like an Uber ride or a yellow cab. It's like someone driving a 90s Honda, of course, probably the guy at the front desk brother or something. So I jump in his cab, I show him the money, and I'm like, let's go to the airport. It's a 4-hour drive. And I get like 20 minutes outside of this town. And I realize like this is not a great situation. Like maybe I was, I'm just kind of having an anxiety attack. I'm thinking I'm in the middle of Mexico. It's 2 a.m. It's a point where I'm really freaking out. And this is the first point I remember probably since I was in high school that I genuinely just stopped and started praying. And I just started praying, and I was in the back of this car, and it's a very pivotal moment in my faith. Like I'm really letting it all out. I'm like, Lord, help me get through this. I don't like being in this situation. You're all I've got. And I'm just kind of in the middle of this panic. And so I asked the guy to pull over, and we're in the middle of Mexico. I get out of the car. I walk like 5 feet into a field. I mean, this is like a 2-lane highway. And I look up and I see just the most immaculate blanket of stars. Like, it's just amazing. I'm in the middle of Mexico. And so I feel this peace come over me, and I'm seeing like shooting stars. And it's just like, it was an experience that was divine, and God was involved in it. And like, it immediately changed me. And I got back into that cab. I started talking with the guy driving. I mean, he knew something was up. He could just see it on my face. I ended up falling asleep, waking up early at the crack of dawn in a big, busy city in traffic, about 10 minutes from the airport. I get out of the cab. I hand the guy money. I shake his hand, and I'm back. I head back home. And I think about, it's weird how those things work. I think about that cab driver. I was like, man, he knew, like, God put him there. Like I was thinking in my mind, this guy's gonna like take my money and throw me in the middle of Mexico and leave me. And I think sometimes in my head, like, I wonder if like when I go to heaven, I'll see that guy. Like I wouldn't even recognize his face, but like he was just there, and it was almost like an angel. So that, like, I always include that in my testimony, because it was just one of those pivotal moments where God just shook me and said, I'm here. I felt his presence, and it was a first for me. And so after that, like it wasn't like a immediate transformation. Like I'm going to church every day, and it was just a gradual, like, I'm back in the Word. I'm reading my Bible now. I feel very motivated to be this furniture maker. So I'm tuned in and focused on that. And I end up not long after that meeting my wife, who is an amazing woman, who's a woman of faith. And she's, she just lifts me into, a better walk with the Lord. And, that's kind of a condensed, pretty quick version of how I went from growing up in a very solid Christian household to kind of straying off, chasing things of the world, very worldly life. And then, God really grabbed hold of me in a serious way. And people, anytime I defend my faith, I'm not a super like theological or book smart human being. Like, that's just not my gift, but I know God's real. I know what I experienced in that cab in Mexico. And like, that's what I like to share with people. It's like, I don't need, that's all I need. God's presence was with me. The Holy Spirit was there. And, it was a pretty amazing experience. So.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's incredible, man. My testimony is very similar. That I grew up in church, went to a Baptist church, got baptized when I was young. And there's no doubt that, when I got baptized, I was saved.
Yeah.
But I didn't fully understand the gospel.
Yeah.
Nobody taught me. It was more of, you need to get baptized so that you don't go to hell. And all right, you got baptized. They never told me, okay, you got baptized now. This is what it's like to have a relationship with Jesus. This is what it's like to study his word and hunger for his word and get to know him, to spend time in prayer, talking to him, to trust him. And, but the magnificent thing I see about your story is that even though you went to Baylor, you're in the film school, and just like me, doing things you shouldn't have been doing, hanging out with people you shouldn't have, you got a YouTube channel now. So God took an area, a time period of your life that, while you might say, I wasn't living for the Lord, he was like, nope, but I'm going to take that and bring it on up here when you are living for me, and bless you with what were you, like 500,000 subscribers or something. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? So
it's a great connection.
And God's done that in my life, and I know Will's life as well. So he takes and works all things together for his good when we can't see it. So
one of the things I always say, and those who are regulars of the podcast know what I'm about to say, is that sometimes you have to go through tragedy to see God's majesty. In those moments where we've got nowhere to turn, and the only thing you can abide in is his Holy Spirit, and pray for that peace and that wisdom. Man, it's a hard thing. And I'll be honest, I was baptized, how old I was 2003, 2004. And I mean, it hasn't been, even though I was in youth ministry and I grew up in the church, probably not the last 5 years have I really gotten solid with my faith in a way, right? It took 20 years almost to get to a place. And it's powerful to hear your vulnerability and willing to talk about some of that stuff. And so you met your wife, and just so you know, we've had podcasts go for a couple hours, so we're not in any rush, but we don't have to go that long. But so you meet your wife, and what does that process look like to get to where you're at? Because I think I've heard you say on your channel that you have Bible studies in your shop, and you host that kind of stuff. Like, what is that from the time you kind of meet your wife to where you are now? What's that look like, and how's that journey been?
The Bible studies in the shop is fairly recent. That's more of our small group from church. So the gentleman I spoke of, who was in the Air Force, his wife and my wife as couples we led a small group for 2 years. And we still have the same small group, but we have new leaders now. And we would kind of, the way our small group worked is, well, the girls would meet, the guys would meet, and then we'd meet together as a family. And so when the guys met, we were either meeting at my buddy's place or in the shop. So that's kind of how the Bible studies happen in the shop. But to kind of answer the question more, once I met her, she was living in Austin, and she was at a point in her life too where there wasn't any, like, it was just a little bit empty. She was in downtown Austin. It's a hard place to live. It's expensive, and she was just burned out. And she moved back home to Bernie, she grew up here. And I basically followed her because I was in Waco at the time. It was around 2008, and I tried to start my first furniture business then in Waco, and this was right before Magnolia took off. In 2008 was an economic disaster, and it went horrible. So it didn't work out at all. So I packed up everything in a U-Haul, and after us dating for 4 or 5 months, I followed her to Bernie, moved into her grandparents' guest house. And her dad got me a job he's a home builder, got me a job with a custom door shop in town. So, and I forgot to mention, in the mix of all that, I had the opportunity to do a brief apprenticeship with Brian Boggs in Kentucky. So that kind of mixes in some of my woodworking, training. But yeah, so I ended up moving to Bernie. Not long after that, we get married, and I worked for 3 years at that door shop. And in that time, my wife was working at a church here in Bernie, so we were involved in that church, and there was I was a much different person at that time than I was even after I got back from Mexico after that pivotal moment. I'd grown a lot in my faith, and even more now as I've had kids and we've led small groups and just gotten more involved in the church. So, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Very good. What was I going to ask? Oh, what's your, we always ask guests on the podcast, not always, but what's your favorite book of the Bible?
Man, I really like Galatians a lot.
Oh,
I'm a New Testament guy.
Oh, I am. Yeah.
Yep. Galatians is one of my favorites.
Absolutely. Love it. Good stuff. Man, that's awesome. So we kind of heard the woodworking intermingled. Tell us about how you started your business and kind of how you got in the woodworking to where you are now. Cause we kind of heard how you got the interest for it, but like, how'd you get to where you are? You got an awesome, shop, and you've got a reputation now. I mean, people buy your furniture all over the place. And so how'd you get here?
Yeah. So I worked in the door shop for 3 years. And that shop is actually 4 minutes up the road from me. And I approached that job with the intent to start my own business. And I told his name's Brent Catterton. He owns Catterton Woodworks. I told him when I started that, I don't intend to stay here. I'm going to do my own thing, but I'll commit for 2 to 3 years. And I was thankful that he was willing to still hire me. He was basically going to, he trained me a lot. And I looked to him as a very pivotal mentor in my journey, because before then I lacked a lot of confidence in my ability. Like if someone came to me and wanted something, I could talk myself out of it real quick because I can't do that, And I watched how Brent operated, how he approached woodworking, and just everything he had in his shop at his disposal to create something out of wood, how he could bring all that together and tackle any challenge. And he had a real confident attitude about, hey, we can build anything. Doesn't matter. And so and he threw me into the fire, and I built a lot of complicated doors with arch tops and laminated door jambs and, just some really complicated stuff. And so that really got me. That was just a huge catalyst for me. And after that 3-year marker, I told him, hey, I'm ready to do this on my own. And we kind of worked together on how that would look like. I stayed with him for 3 or 4 months, helped him get through some work, and then just cold turkey went off, and I had 2 jobs lined up. The advantage I had when I started out of my garage very briefly. My wife didn't like it. She kicked me out pretty quick because we had our laundry room in the garage. So we didn't have a very big house at the time. But I had my father-in-law was a home builder, and my wife's uncle owned the home build company, and they built really nice high-end homes. And Bernie, the town I live in, is somewhat of a affluent demographic. So it's a lot of wealthy people. And I was able to have that connection through my father-in-law, and probably 50 to 60% of my work in the first 2 years came from them. And they had an interior designer as well on staff, and she gave me a lot of work. Now I didn't know at the time, but they were getting a smoking deal on everything I built them. I was working for pretty cheap, but I was building a name for myself. And, it didn't matter to me, once you start a business, everything changes. And if you have a wife and family, you got to make money. And so I was just like, whatever you need, I'll build it. Stair treads, a stair rail, a mantle, cabinets, and I just kind of opened the door and said, whatever I can tackle, I'll do for you. And that's what I did for the first 2 to 3 years, just a lot of random custom jobs. I did trim work some, and I just, if I got in with one of their homeowners, the house they were building, and I was able to build their mantle, well, oftentimes they would introduce me to the homeowner and be like, well, look, I really want to build furniture. Do you need a dining room table? I would try to upsell something. And really what I saw happen is as I built more, dining room tables are really kind of the core piece of furniture people order. Obviously that's the meeting place, and that's the piece most people want. And as I built more tables, there was never any marketing and never any spending on any of that. It's just your clients become your sales reps, because they have people over and they eat on the table and they tell them all about who I am and like, oh, this guy made it handmade. Look at this joint here. And, and it just kind of really slowly snowballed. And I always had this motto that it didn't matter. Well, it mattered, but I didn't overly concern myself with if I was way over on the hours I bid, like let's say I'm just not making any money on this project, I still tried to make the best piece I could because I knew it mattered. And I knew that if I realized, oh man, I bid this at 40 hours and I put 60 into it, this is just killing me. I just need to get it done. I don't care how good it is. Like I just never allowed myself to have that mentality. I just built the best I could, even if the money wasn't great when I did it. And I think that really helped because it was like I said, it was just slow snowball clientele. And, there were some tough times in that, first 5 years where it was really hard financially. And then there was times where it was just a roller coaster ride. And I feel like around the 5-year marker, it started to be consistent where I actually had a backlog. I actually had, I have 4 or 5 months of work lined up, and it stayed. And that was really a great moment, to have that realization. And I've learned a lot since then. I'm not in any way a business-minded person. I've done pretty good figuring it out as I go. And I've had people help me and had mentors in that area. I'm really good at figuring out how to build something and executing it. That's where I shine. But when it comes to figuring out how to make that super profitable, that's hard. And it's even harder. I always tell people, like, in all the trades, I feel like building custom furniture is the most difficult business model there is. It's just really challenging. You're taking basically a raw material, a piece of wood that one step prior was a tree growing in the ground, before the sawmill. And you're turning that into really complicated parts and a piece of furniture that has to last. For me, I guarantee everything for a lifetime. So there's a lot of complexity in building it so it can do that. Contrast that to an electrician or a plumber, awesome trades. They make, I pay plumbers and electricians to do things around my house. I know that they do pretty good. And they get pipes. They have a setup of pipes and elbows and fittings and stuff. They don't have to make the pipe. They don't have to shape the pipe. It's like, it's a lot different. I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but like, there's just a lot more work in building custom
Absolutely.
furniture.
There is.
Yeah.
And I also think, like, from the business side of things, like plumber's a perfect example, or the electrician. Their wire comes on a spool.
Yep.
They can measure and get really close as to how much lineage of wire they needed.
Mm-hmm.
The pipe fitter, same thing. He's got to have a little waste cutting off a little here and there. Yeah. But like when you go to pick up rough cut lumber and they bring the whole thing out, you got one board that's 5 3/4 wide, the next one's 7 1/4, and this one, and it's trying hard. To where I struggle is the efficiency of the use of the material, trying to have as least amount of wastage as possible. Mm-hmm. And I always end up, I don't know how to really explain it, but like, for example, like if you're calculating how many board foot you need to build a table, and then you can't, you calculate it based on roughly, I've got an 8-inch joiner, so I'm going to try to get all boards that are kind of around 7.5 or so. But then you go there and they don't have what you need. So you end up with some that are 8.5. Well, I can't joint a 8.5 because I don't have a big enough. So I have to, what do? I have to trim off a little and I'm wasting. That's where I struggle. And I cannot figure out the answer to maximizing the profit on every piece. Sometimes I do well, but rest of the time I always seem to consume a little bit more than wastage than what I had planned for. Do you experience that too? Or?
So I don't overly worry about that. And here's the thing, so when I sell a piece of furniture, people will often, I can tell if someone's really tight on money, they're going to ask, well, can we use a different wood or something of that nature? And I'm going to tell them the wood is not for the most part, the wood is not a horribly significant part of the cost. It's the labor, it's the shop time. It's you paying me to turn the wood into a piece of furniture. Unless we're working with, the only time that I take that mentality you have is if I'm working with really expensive timber, something that's really rare or valuable, or some big slabs, that's cost a lot of money. But I generally don't allow myself to get too worked up over efficiency of material for the most part. When I bid a job, let's say I'm building a dining room table, and I assume I'm going to need 150 board feet of walnut on the dot. Like that's what I think I need for all the parts. Well, I'm going to put generally 30% extra board footage onto that. And I'm going to have that buffer in there for boards that come in that I think aren't good enough. Boards, I don't know. I want to give myself the opportunity as a craftsman and artist to not feel restricted by being overly efficient with the material. And when you talk about an extra, the cost to the client, the extra 40 board feet is insignificant in relation to the cost of the client's paying them the labor for me to do it. Insignificant is not the right word. I want to respect the client's money and do it well, but the end product is going to be that much better if I'm not freaking out about every little efficiency of the material. And the funny thing is, you bring that up. I was listening to what's his name, the Alabama woodworker, y'all's podcast today. He was talking about his CNC, and he chose not to use a CNC to make handles, which I totally respect that decision because he's looking out for the client. But then I was like, man, and he's probably using some expensive mahogany, so he wants to be efficient, and he's also making a whole bunch of them, so it does add up. But I was thinking to myself, I don't always have that mentality. Maybe I should, because he does it on the side and he does it for clients. But yeah, unless it's a really valuable material, I don't overly, if I was doing it for myself, spending my money, now I would. I'd be like, how efficient can I get? But I the client ultimately, if you look at a bid, 70% of the cost is going to the labor. The rest is going to the lumber. So, they're paying me to make the decisions and make the cuts. And let's not worry about, $200 or $300 in a piece that costs $10,000, Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Of course, I'm not a full-time furniture builder like you. I'm a sign maker by trade. So when I'm building a piece of furniture, it's for us or friends or family. And and so that's where I guess, me, I
don't think you're wrong at all. Yeah.
I'm not rich, but if I'm in the price of white oak and walnut right now are through crazy. The roof here. Yeah. So that's where, and I guess I'm a cheapskate. I'm just always trying to be efficient. I don't know.
I find that if there's anywhere I want to be efficient in my shop, it's how I build and the process, and what can I do to shave off a few hours, or what can you know what I'm saying? And that's because I don't know, my mind's more focused on the costlier side of the actual shop hours I'm putting into it.
Yeah. Well, if you save those jigs and stuff like that you're going to build this trestle table again.
Yeah.
And so you can pull out that jig and saves you so much time from having to do it again.
Yeah. And I mean, there's times we've had times where we've built with really expensive slabs that have cost a lot of money. And when you have something like that and the client's paid for that, I'm getting everything I can out of that. If I'm getting parts for a piece, I'm not just going to carelessly cut it up and not worry about it, and I'm thinking about where do I want quarter, rift, and flat, and all that stuff. So, and that's another thing when I build, a big thing that separates a really good piece from a piece that's not as good is the selection of the grain and how you present that in the piece. And sometimes that requires, if you've got a piece where you want straight grain and it's crooked in the board, sometimes you got to take it to the bandsaw and cut along that grain and straighten it out, and that creates waste, but it's worth it. So,
yeah. Especially when you got a big Oliver bandsaw, you can
Oh,
That thing's awesome, man.
it is. I love that saw.
So let me ask you this two-sided question.
Yeah.
What's the hardest thing you've ever built, and what's your favorite thing you've ever built?
Man, people always ask me what the favorite thing is, and there's so many. I really like. There was a dresser that I built for a guy, and it's not that impressive of a piece, but just the process of making it. It was out of escarpment cherry, which is a cherry tree that grows in the hill country, and it was four graduated drawers, very shaker inspired, and it was all hand fitted carcass with dovetails, and it was a real joy to make. I mean, all that process and the satisfaction for me of like having a piece built that doesn't have any physical hardware. Like it's like it was made 100 years ago, and the drawers slide nice and smooth. And it was that. I always go back to that piece because I just really, and I have a YouTube video, I think a 2-part video on that one. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
And most challenging, I'm trying to think. When I first started, I had a guy want me to build a custom. His wife was a photographer, and he wanted a custom photo booth that looked like a piece of furniture, but converted into a photo booth. So when they had friends over and parties, it looked like a hutch, but it would all open up and become a photo booth. That was interesting. That was a challenging one because at the time I didn't have a lot of equipment, nothing like I have now. And there was just a lot of complexity to it, so it took a lot of time to figure out.
Yeah, it's funny. I think Tom and I have talked on the podcast about like skill versus tools or equipment.
Yeah.
And my first real like cabinet style table saw, I didn't realize how bad I had it and how easier it was to woodwork with a decent table saw. Right. Yeah. And so there's kind of that balance of like, yeah, I know guys that can build with hardly anything, but man, it's nice having that saw stop, man.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful that I've had it both ways. And I'm also very grateful that I learned, like the first real piece of furniture I built, I did everything with hand tools. The material was milled on machines for me, but mortises cut with hand tools, joinery, tenons cut with saws and chisels. The legs had a taper that was done with a hand plane. So everything was done by hand. And I'm so grateful. I built a rocking chair too, all by hand. And this was all through Paul Sellers at that school. I'm so grateful I have that. I mean, if anyone is getting into woodworking, I think having a good hand tool fundamental like background is great. And there's so many times, like there's a piece I'm building right now that I've used my CNC. I've used the CNC and my router to do a lot of the work, but everything has to be fitted and put together with hand tools. Like it just has to be done that way. I never really fit a joint right off a machine. I almost always pick up a hand tool or something and make just a few fine adjustments to get the fit just right. So
I need to work on my hand tool skills.
Me too. I do.
I've got a nice Japanese like dovetail saw that honestly makes dovetails easier because it cuts so good.
Yeah.
But I need to work on my hand tool skills.
It's such a great skill to have. I mean, it's not, you don't, if you're a hobbyist woodworker, you obviously don't have to do that. And it's a lot of people, it's overwhelming to learn because there's a huge learning curve to it, so, but as someone who's done it professionally, that's like the most valuable bit of training I have.
What brand of hand tools do you like? What
most of what I have for a long time has been Stanley's. I bought off eBay, like in the early 2000s, and then my wife got me a 4.5. 4.5 is my favorite hand plane, just the one I use the most. I have 2 Stanleys, and I keep one set up for a heavy cut, and I keep one set up for a fine cut. And then my wife got me the Lee Nielsen version. And like you were saying with the table saw, I was like, oh, you don't need this fancy, expensive hand tool. And I used it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this thing, incredible. So Lee Nielsen's the one. I have 2 or 3, or actually 4 Lee Nielsen's up there right now. I have 2 that one that I'm actually not using right now because I've sharpened it so many times the blade I can't get it to cut. It's too short. So I need to get a new blade for it, which I feel in and of itself is quite the accomplishment to sharpen a hand tool so many times that you've backed off like an inch of blade.
That's awesome.
That's a lot of years of use, man.
You were saying Paul Sellers and then Frank Straza.
Yeah.
That guy makes the nicest bench in the world. His houndtooth benches are just
amazing, dude.
It does all that stuff, and he does the lettering, right? He
does the lettering. He does letter carving. His marquetry. He's gotten big into marquetry, and he's, in my opinion, for sure one of the top 5, American furniture makers. And the cool thing about Frank is he's like 30 minutes from my shop, and Frank probably wouldn't. I don't know. Frank's an interesting guy, but I don't know if he would appreciate me saying this, but he works out of a garage and he builds the most elite furniture he basically has a little table saw in the middle of his garage, 2 workbenches, a mortiser, and a bunch of hand tools. And that's all he has. And now
you did a series a while ago about woodworkers or something.
Yeah, it's called Have It Made. Yeah.
Yeah. And you interviewed him, didn't you?
I did. We went to his shop and I filmed him and interviewed him. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I first saw him at. I was like, that dude can make a bench, and just his hand tool skills is just next level.
I took a sackback Windsor chair class from him and built multiple Windsor chairs after taking that class. So yeah, he's a talented guy for sure. I look up to him.
So let me ask you, with YouTube and then building furniture, like, how do you balance your time between filming and making? And I know your priorities on the furniture, but kind of in an average work week.
Yeah. So I've actually really struggled with this part of it because I've been on an interesting journey. So I had the furniture business, then I got into YouTube, and I have a my YouTube journey is not normal. Like my 4th video has gotten, it got like 1 million views. It just like you look at my growth, and it was like the 3rd month of my channel being live, it just shot up. I was like 50,000 subscribers, tons of views, and I was like, whoa, like this is easy. I really thought that. Oh, hold on. Can y'all hear that?
What was that? I heard something.
The compressor.
Oh.
Is that okay?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
I didn't want to mess things up. It'll turn off. Anyway, so it shot way up, and I had kind of an unrealistic view of YouTube because for the first 3 or 4 years, it was just super easy. And it's kind of a pivotal point where I could have stopped taking commissions. I didn't need to. I was making enough on YouTube money wise that I could have just been a YouTuber. And a lot of people told me I should do that. And I don't know. I look back on that and no, maybe I made the wrong decision, but I just didn't do it. I wanted to continue building furniture for people. And I'm kind of straying away from your question, but I will answer it. And so I think about that moment because YouTube's a lot different for me now. It's very small percentage of my revenue in comparison. The furniture is much bigger. If you look at my growth on YouTube, it spikes, it kind of leveled, and it's, I actually, believe it or not, lose subscribers every month now. So the growth of the channel in and of itself, I don't know what the future of it looks like, but where I'm at now to get into answering your questions is I only film really what I'm building in the shop for clients. That's the only way for it financially to make sense. And unless a video is sponsored, and I really only have one sponsor right now on my channel that really helps drive it from a business standpoint. So, I will, like today I'm working on a piece and I was filming it all day and I'm still building for that client. Now, eventually I'll have to stop for a couple days and edit the video because it will take me, depending on what it is, a day or two to edit and voiceover and get it all ready to go live. So there's weeks where I'm building 30 hours of furniture work and filming it all at once. And there's weeks where maybe I've got 2 or 3 days of post-production editing, for YouTube. So that kind of answers the time part of it. And to go back to what I was saying, like, I think the mistake I made is when I was doing well, I should have hired someone to come in and help take on a lot of the responsibilities of the YouTube channel. Kind of missed that window. And so now I'm in a position where it's like the channel doesn't generate the revenue really to bring someone in. So I'm kind of having still to handle it all. And at being 43 and having 3 kids, I have a way different mentality than I had when I was 33. Like when I was 33, I could put in 60, 70 hour work week and not care, but now it's like my daughter's 10, those 10 years just flew by, and I don't want, if it costs me, some of the channel, some of the revenue, I don't want to lose time with my kid. That I just value time differently. Yep. Basically is what I'm saying.
Well, I'm going to tell you, that's a smart decision. Because my daughter is 21 now, and buddy, it seems like just yesterday, she was 4 years old and us running around. Those years just flew by, and I could be a lot further along financially if I had not stayed at home, homeschooled her, and really focused. But man, we've got memories that'll outlast any bank account. So
it's so cliche to hear people say that how quick time flies, but man, I like being 43 now, like hitting my 40s. There's 3 things I've realized. I've realized the value of time, like how quick, and the reason for that is because my kids, I see how quickly they've grown up. And then I realize like my body's fragile. Like I hurt sometimes, and like, I realize the importance of taking care of myself.
Wait till you're 53, buddy.
Yeah. I know I shouldn't be saying that yet, but like I have to eat well, I have to get sleep.
Yep.
I do have to exercise, so, and I had a third thing, but I totally lost it, but it's probably pretty important. I'll figure it out if it comes to me. Those are,
curiosity. So I've felt like God telling me to start a YouTube channel for a while. So I actually set the channel up. It's officially there 2 days ago or yesterday, and I'm gonna start putting for a woodworking channel. I started one on exercise, but just kind of a vlogging channel. But the thing is, when I get in the shop, if I film it, it takes me, I feel like 10 times longer to do the build than if I didn't film it. And so every time I've tried to start in the past, I'm just like, man, this is taking too long. Shut the camera off and then I just build it. And so
I've been there.
How do you feel like it affects your build process, or have you figured out some tricks so that it doesn't affect it as much?
I've gotten pretty good at it. I mean, I use one camera, and my main goal, like I have an idea in my brain, like how I want this video to flow. Mm-hmm. But really my goal is just to have one camera. It's on a tripod. It's a good camera I have 2 lenses I can swap out. And I'm just trying to get a combination of informative shots that show what I'm doing, but also pretty shots, if that makes sense. Like something cool with like some, I don't know, just something interesting, some neat looking shots. And I've gotten really good at just being able to kind of think 2 steps ahead and be like, okay, I'm about to go into cutting this joint. So today I worked on a pretty complicated joint on a table that's a circle, and it has 4 legs that connect to it. I filmed 2 of those, the process of 2 of those legs pretty intensely, like fitting them and using hand tools. And then I just put the camera away and do the rest, so I kind of think through what I want to film. A lot of times I will say, well, I'm not going to, like milling the lumber, I'm just not going to film that. I know I probably won't use a lot of that content. So I've gotten pretty good. And, my original format was no voiceover, just the work. And that was a really easy, straightforward process because it's very linear. It's you get clip after clip and you go in to edit it and you just go through the clips and you just stack them together. And the only thing I thought about on that process was how was I transitioning from shot to shot? Because I would do cool things where like I'm working on the vise, but I got to go up to my bandsaw. So I'm going to get a cool shot of me switching from the vise to the bandsaw. So I think about those transition shots. And then as I evolved, I got real, and this was probably a point where my channel really kind of started the slow decline as I got kind of bored of the carving and quiet videos. So I started doing some vlog style stuff, playing around with that. And then I just eventually got to the point where I started doing voiceovers, and I kind of stuck with that because I had mixed feedback between people. A lot of people really like the voiceovers. A lot of people like the quiet videos, but I don't know what led me into just sticking to voiceovers. So that's, from the camera and the workflow point of view, I've filmed so many of them that I've just gotten good at getting into a routine and having an idea of what I'm trying to accomplish. And a lot of times I'll even stop if there's a really interesting point, throw on a mic and shoot an Instagram reel or a Patreon video explaining what I'm doing, like in real time. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah. But it changes that dynamic, and it's not, for me personally, it's not as much fun as a craftsman because you've got to be thinking about that, and sometimes you got to stop and do it. But it is an important part of what I do and who I, making the content, and I think it has a good purpose. So I want to keep doing it.
Now, do your clients ever see the videos, or you like say, hey, I filmed myself building this. Here's the YouTube video of it. And is that received pretty well? Yeah, it's received really well. The only one that was a little questionable, I don't know if y'all know Matt Carricker from Demolition Ranch. So he's a good buddy. I've been following him for years. Yeah. He actually shot my first video for me. He's the reason I did YouTube. Because I've known Matt and I, the first time Matt showed me I was actually in a Bible study with Matt at our first church. And we were done with our Bible study, and he was like, hey, I want to show you guys something. And he pulled up his YouTube channel, and he was like blowing up something in the field. I was like, what are you doing, dude? Yeah. This looks really dumb. And that was the thought I had. And then I watched Matt's journey into, huge amount of success. And at one point he came to me, he was like, you should do a YouTube channel. I was like, man, I'm not like you. I don't want to be in front of a camera. It's awkward to me. Just don't want to do it. He's like, there's this guy called Primitive Technology or something. He was telling me about. He's like, he just films himself building something. He's like, I think you could be really successful with that. He's like, I'll do your first video. And he did. He came in and I built Paul Seller's sawhorses, and he brought the camera in and he filmed it and he helped edit it. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but I felt like he was like, you need to commit to doing 10 of these. And, he even, when he saw that I committed to it, he even plugged me on his, which helped a lot. But yeah, he's the reason I got into YouTube. And then I forget where I was going with this. Where was I going before I went down this rabbit hole? Because Matt, I totally lost my train of thought. What was the original question you asked me? Sorry, it's 9:00.
It was about the,
filming the video.
And slowing down.
I'm back. Yeah. Okay, I got it. I did a table for a guy, a really huge reclaim table, and Matt he just gotten into buying like stupid cars for his videos, and he had a little like open wheel race car that was like a half go-kart, half car. It was just this little car. And I took it to his place where he sells his merch, and I was like, hey, let's use your forklift and put it on the table and show that the table can hold the weight of your car. And that was kind of a dumb idea, but I was reaching for some clickbait on that one because it was a thumbnail of a car sitting on my table. It's not my proudest moment, but the client was like, well, hey, what would you have done if it broke? They were a little bit, because I did it for a designer, and she's like, do you really think that was a good idea? And I was like, it wasn't going to break. I was confident in that, but I don't know. It could have broken, but she was a little bit sketched out by that. So I haven't done that since, but yeah, clients love seeing it. When they see the process and what goes into it, it just shows, that it just shows them what it takes, Yeah, absolutely.
I've been following Matt for even longer. I mean, I'm a gun guy.
Yeah.
You love shooting guns and all that kind of stuff. And I had a proud moment of Matt when he decided to take his family off the channel, because it's extremely important. There's so many weird people out there, and
he's had some sketchy stuff happen.
Right. Yeah. And I don't follow him as much anymore. Some of the gun stuff. He does a lot with that new property he bought, all these Airbnbs and remodeling stuff. I just haven't followed him as much lately. But I remember seeing a post on Instagram from him where his daughter or her son got baptized.
Yeah.
I'm like, that makes sense. I thought Matt was, seemed like a solid guy. Make some questionable decisions on the internet, but
I've seen Matt go through a pretty cool journey. He's a very genuine, down to earth guy, and he goes to my church and he's there every Sunday and he serves. And his wife Meredith, she was pretty big on Instagram, and she just completely, like, she was just like, I'm done with all this, Yeah. So, and I think Matt, I don't know where Matt is. I think he'll keep doing what he's doing, but just to speak on him, he's a solid dude, and he went through a lot with his brother and that whole thing. And I was intermixed in a lot of that. I was good friends with, there's a lot to that story. And that was a big point where I witnessed Matt get baptized and his dad get baptized and his brother all get baptized at our church.
Wow.
So before his brother passed away. So yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Very good. Incredible. Well, Andy, what you got working on the shop? I know you said you're working on a client build, a round table. Can you talk a little bit about what you got going on in the shop? I've
had a pretty good client it's a nonprofit called the HEB Foundation, and they run a really well-known family camp out in the Texas Hill Country. And I've done a work for them on the YouTube videos. I filmed it in the past 3 years, and so they've commissioned me to do more work for them. I'm doing 4 pieces. So one is like a big kind of cabinet display case that's nothing super fancy, and then 2 kind of side hutches to go with that. And then what I've been working on now is a 40-inch diameter table that will have a CNC carving, topographic carving of their camp property. So it's kind of this cool mix between it's a real traditional looking piece with this kind of modern carving on top of it. But basically where I'm at today was I laminated up the apron. So it's a 4.5-inch wide apron, 1 inch thick. It's built out of 10 laminates, and it's glued and bent around a form to capture that radius. And it's basically 2 pieces that I cut and joined together and made it into a 40-inch diameter circle. And then I have 6 legs that connect into it, into the apron. I worked on that joint today, got through most of that. And then there's an undercarriage to it that has stretchers that all meet up at the bottom into the center, into a block. So I'll start working on that stretcher stuff tomorrow, the joinery for it. So that's what I got going on. It's a fun little project.
Wow. How about you, Tom? Anything in the shop? Are you at the farm, getting the farm closed up for the season?
Getting the farm closed up. But yeah, I got a couple projects. I'm embarrassed to say one of them that I got to do, but my wife went and got on Pinterest.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to tell you what, if I could ever meet the guy that invented Pinterest, I'd probably have to slap him upside the head, because all that channel does is add to people's to-do list and take away the creativity of man. It's like, I hate, does it drive y'all crazy to your wife? Like, I want you to build this. It's like, I don't get to design anything. I just got to copycat these dumb wooden ghosts for Halloween. I'm like, so, but it will make my wife happy. So
there you go.
Last year I made some of them wooden pumpkins. I made them much larger than most people did, and she loved them. And then she was setting up all her Halloween decor out there. We don't do all the like wicked type Halloween. It's just kind of, I made some comical looking pumpkins with smiley faces. It's more of a fall setup than, but it's just like, I need something over here on the corner of the porch. And I was like, well, all right, well, tell me what you want. And of course what she do? Goes to Pinterest and I want some of these. I'm like, oh, that's just so exciting to build. But I'm going to do those. And then my daughter came to me and said, Dad, can you get my triathlon bike? We did triathlons back in North Carolina. And since we moved here, we have not. And we both have been talking about it. She's like, can you get it down and set it up on the trainer? And so I'm going to put it on the trainer in her room. But she is a college student. She's in her senior. She'll graduate in December. But she's got to go on to PT school. But she wants to be able to ride the bike and study at the same time or watch a movie. So I'm going to build a table that will slide up to her bike on the trainer and have it where she could sit her iPad on it and watch a movie, or make the top flip up where she could sit a book and be able to read while she's training. So those are the two things on my docket. How about you, Will?
Yeah, I had that wedding I went to Saturday, and Andy, I've talked to Tom about this, but 4 weddings this year.
Wow.
And I can't afford to give everybody money. Yeah. Like a single income home here, but I can build stuff, and I have a laser engraver. And so I've been just making monogram signs for them to put, on their wall in their new house kind of thing. And so I kind of forgot about it. And so Thursday I was like, oh crap, I got to melt some lumber. And so got that just nice piece of cherry and got it milled up and engraved and whatnot. But outside of that, I've been working on some of the business stuff and got a new product coming, so I'm pretty excited about that. But Andy, I'll tell you the story after we stop recording, the whole story. But I started a hard wax oil business, and so I make hard wax oil wood finish.
Nice.
And that's been going well. There's been a big hiccup in that, and I'll tell you about that offline. But I'm coming out with like a paste wax, and so kind of like a shop wax, all natural, using on wood, leather, table saw, that kind of stuff. And so I just ordered my labels for those, so I can start putting them on the website here soon. But so I spent some time doing that. Not too much on the docket for woodworking, aside from probably going to be building a deck off the back of the house here. So that's going to be my October project, if you will. So just a small 8x14, going to do composite decking because I don't want to ever have to touch it again.
Yeah. That'll hold up.
I watch your whole deck series of redoing your deck. Yeah. Dude, that wood is sweet.
It is. I feel very fortunate to have gotten to work with that company. I expected total crickets from them when I reached out to them, and I was very grateful that they were. I've actually tried to go a second round and do another deck, but I haven't heard back from them. So maybe it didn't go well. I don't know, but it's held up well too. That's an awesome space. I love going out there. Like, that's my spot in the morning to go and have quiet time and chill. So
absolutely. Awesome. So Andy, where can people find you at on the Instagrams and the YouTubes and stuff?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's AR Texas Woodcraft. And then YouTube is just my name, Andy Rawls. And then I have a website, www.andyrawls.com. So
awesome, man.
That's where you can find me.
Awesome. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your testimony and being vulnerable and how the Lord has used you and how he's continuing to use you. And man, really appreciate you coming on. So
thanks for having me, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Well, until next week, I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.